Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today for the Friday conversation number 76. 76, quite a few. So, here with some friends just to chat for the week. Varsha, will you kick us off with some introductions, please?
Hi, my name is Varsha, and I run a tiny YouTube channel called Reading by the Rainy Mountain, where I like to talk about my favorite books and most recently have lots of conversations about my favorite books with my friends.
The best kind. And Janny?
I'm Janny Wurts. I'm an author and an illustrator, and I'm here because this profession keeps you very housebound. And I was kind of wanting to hang out with some friends today. So it's delightful that Steve hosts this, and I'm happy to be here.
It's great to see you again. And Chris?
Yeah, my name's Chris Mohan. I am somebody who likes to be housebound a lot of the time. I like my inside spaces and not being outside too much. And no better way and to spend a Friday night than the company of lots of good people. Oh, and by the way, I sort of have a YouTube channel as well, but I don't talk about it that much.
You should. You do really good stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
And Holly?
I'm Holly Tinsley. I'm a writer, author, super nerd, and Steve has kindly recently let me waffle on about board games on page chewing, so expect a lot more of that in the future as I broaden my board game collection.
That sounds scary.
It is. My cupboard is terrifying. You open it and tentacles come out.
So Holly, I have to ask. I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm dying for the third book in your Vanguard Crows. When can we expect to grab your little hands on it? When can we? And no pressure, just
no pressure at all. Yeah. Well, with that, it's in the works. There's been, I don't want to say it's been a hiccup, but there's been some changes made recently to the team that I work with. So my cover artist is now moved on to new ventures and he's doing some new stuff for himself. So there's going to be some changes to the artwork that goes with the books, not just the third, but the first and the second as well. My editor as well, who is lovely, is currently on maternity leave. And at the moment, it's just a case of because the team that I've worked with have been so integral to the first two books, there's a bit of a pause. So I don't want to disappoint people by saying it's going to be a while, but it's going to be a little while. But it is happening. It is going to be within the next year or two.
What's your book about?
So the series that I write is a Gaslamp Grimdark fantasy series. It's centered around a ex-mercenary who is trying to figure out how to live in a very corrupt city where there's lots of politics. I feel very badly prepared for this because it's been so long since I've talked about it.
Oh, okay.
There it is. Yeah. See, Steve's much better prepared than I am. Yeah, it's if you've read Peter McLean, it's kind of in the same vein as that style. It's kind of inspired by Assassin's Creed and kind of video games. So yeah, it's been out for a few years now, and the third one, I say, it's in the works, but obviously I want to wait until the team's all back together.
And is that going to be the finish? Is it a trilogy, or is this an ongoing series?
So the plan is that this next one will probably be the last book. At the moment, I'm wavering between keeping it as one last third book or maybe splitting it into a third and a fourth. I'm just going to kind of see where the story takes me. It's plotted and planned. It's just how many words there's going to be when I've actually done it. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's looking more likely like it's going to be a 3-book series at the moment.
Well, that's really neat. That's an accomplishment. Good for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
I think the first Gaslamp fantasy I ever encountered was Teresa Edgerson's Gnome's Engine. If you're familiar with that, it's a really older book, but yeah, she was sort of one of the pioneers of that genre. So it's really cool to see how it's sprung alive in the last couple of decades since those books were written.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of kind of authors coming out now and emerging who are really getting into it as a genre. So, you've got a lot of the indie authors like Trudy Skies and Crystal Matar who are all kind of getting into that kind of gas lamp aesthetic. And it's a really cool kind of period and world to explore.
Yeah, the other one that was memorable was Those Who Hunt the Night by Barbara Hambly. Vampire, Gaslamp Vampire. Totally well done, chilling. I've been told from the point of view of a spy and a female doctor who's his wife. So it was an interesting mix. So I really enjoy seeing that branch of the genre blossom out. And yeah, I have noticed a great surge in new writers coming on board doing that kind of thing, and a lot of books set in the underbelly of Europe or Paris or fantasy worlds that are similar. So I think you're right on time.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great as well, because it's one of those genres where I think when I was writing it, I didn't know that was the genre I was writing in. It wasn't until afterwards when I started exploring other books and other writers, and I thought, oh, actually, yeah, that's where I belong.
So are you held up because you have things that you need your team to help you develop, or are you held up because you have the work finished and you're waiting to replace the people that you had working with you?
I mean, at the moment where I am, it's sort of at the stage where we can go through first edits. I mean, I've edited up to the point where you get to that stage where you can't really see the wood for the trees with it, and you need that second pair of eyes. So once Charlotte, my editor, is ready, she's going to come back on board and she's going to give it a read through for me. But I mean, she had a baby like 2 weeks ago, so she's quite preoccupied at the moment.
There's a resource on my website that might help some of you, especially when you're held up on your editor. My copy editors were in business for decades. In fact, he just thought he'd retired, but his wife passed, and now he's going back to work again because he wants something to do. But they gave me the list of the most common errors that authors make that copy editors have to correct. And they provided that list, and it's posted on my website, and you can download it and you can actually use it. And I said, well, don't you want to be credited? I credited them anyway. And they said, oh, no, you're just going to make our jobs easier. We just want people to use the list. So if you have nothing to do while you're waiting, that will shorten their effort.
That's awesome. That's a really good
list of errors. Yeah. And you can do a quick search through your manuscript and clean them all up.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Nice.
It was very generous of them to provide a lifetime's worth of knowledge there. They're amazing people. And I miss Sarah. She passed, I guess, the day before my manuscript hit his desk. Oh. And he called to tell me, and I said, Bob, you do not have to do this job. I'll find a way, because he had done the series with his wife all the way through. I said, I will find a way. And he said, no, I need this. I really want this. So he was actually grateful to have the work, but I felt like, oh, how could I? But he was willing and he was happy, and he wrote me back and said it was a godsend. So I was very grateful that not to be changing horses in midstream. So I know that feeling.
Yeah, I think it's something I think doesn't get spoken about too much, because I think people see writing as something very solitary. I think part of it is, but actually there is a real team behind a book. And, for me, I've kind of enjoyed the process of working with my editor, with my artist. And I think to get to the third book and then have to completely change teams and work with someone else, to me, just doesn't feel right. So I would rather wait that little bit and just...
You know how many times that's happened to me?
Oh, I can imagine.
Oh my God, I've had more editors than I've had books at this point, and changing in midstream. And the latest one that knew anything about what was going on at all is off on maternity leave. This is round several on that. So yeah, you have to learn to adapt. It's hard though. I mean, I see these authors that stay with one team for half their career, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd had that kind of luck. But you're lucky because life moves so fast now. It doesn't usually happen that way.
Yeah.
But I know the feeling. I have been there.
Yeah, I think as readers, we see writing as something, like you said, like solitary, but there's a lot of other people involved that we don't, kind of behind the scenes. So it's like a whole team.
It can be both. Especially if you're working a very complicated series or a complicated set of characters or situations, and then you lose your person and they don't have time to catch up. I'm talking traditional. They just physically don't have enough staff or time to catch up and don't even have time to read it. So then it becomes very solitary very quickly. So you have to develop a lot of resiliency and strength to be able to push through no matter what happens to the people around you, what your family is doing, or what else hits you, because life is going to happen. And that thread of sticking to your guns and doing what you were born to do and holding your creativity is something that really matters, because it does. It becomes very important through changes like that. And it's so easy to have people knock you off balance and take that away. Don't ever let it happen. Let nothing stand in your way of finishing a project that you really want to finish. Because nobody else can do that job. You're it. If you don't do it, we all lose. We all don't get to read it.
Yeah, for sure. And does your approach change if you know that your team around the book is changing? Does your approach to writing change? Do you take that into consideration to make it, I guess, maybe easier on them or to accommodate them in any way? Or is that something you try to avoid doing if you have a different editor or somebody?
Are you directing that question to Holly?
Anybody?
Personally, I don't usually put a project out there to a publisher or editorial team unless I well know what I'm doing to start with. So it's less likely to be upset because it's not reliant on what they think. It's pretty much a formed concept, and they're there to help me strengthen it and make it better. But if they're not tapped into it, if they're not able to keep up with it because their own work is demanding too much of them. So what I've tried to do throughout my entire career is each time somebody with expertise has helped me, I've had a good editor make a good line edit suggestion, or I've had a great copy editor who showed me what the common errors were or instructed me how to do something. I've tried to acquire that skill and put it into the manuscripts that I do next to make their jobs easier. So if they put the pencil to the page, it really required it. I'm not going to waste their time. And so cumulatively, I save that knowledge. And it's become an advantage, because if an editor has two projects that need attention and one needs a lot less, so that author can run on autopilot and they know they don't have to work, it leaves them more time for a newcomer that may need that helping hand. And so I see it as paying forward. I take the lessons they've taught me and make way for them to teach that lesson to somebody new coming on board. So that way, when editors have dropped out of the picture, or when I haven't had an edit, or where literally it went straight from my desk to production to copy edit and straight to print, and nobody read it because they did not physically have the staff to take the time. This happens. Corporate is a mess. I didn't panic because I knew what I had in hand. I just had to be extra rigorous to apply what I had learned to the writing, so it wouldn't trip me too badly. Because unfortunately, when I started, there was many staff in an office. They all had several assistants. There were multiple editors. They were not in meetings all day. They actually read books at their desk. They actually had time to call you on the telephone. These days are long, long gone. Life is moving too fast. So becoming self-reliant as you can and learning as much as you can is probably a valuable contribution to the field as a whole, because you can help others bring their stuff up to standards too.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Certainly from having my first book edited, I took so much forward, and it was my first experience of having been edited as well, which for most writers is probably quite a eye-opening experience, and there's stuff that I've learned that now when I write I still apply in new projects. And it's interesting for me, I've worked with newer writers, both in fiction and non-fiction, through the work that I do, and the first time they get edited properly, that they get, sometimes it's quite upsetting because you just think, oh, I'm terrible, and this is, I've done this really badly. And it's just, no, it's a learning curve where you get this knowledge that, Janny just mentioned, and you take it forward into your next work, and that becomes really valuable.
So are there anybody else here who writes, or if you don't write, what brought you to your love of science fiction and fantasy, and you're creating channels to talk about it, and all the time, Steve, that you invest in your forum and your various activities. Something keeps coming back. More.
It's funny because I'm a qualified literacy teacher, and one of the first exercises that we did in terms of that was to examine our own writing to kind of see what our own proclivities or styles were in our general writing. So just produce 1,000 words and then break it down very grammatically into, your dangling participles and all of the things that kind of go with to kind of see if you could spot some patterns in your own writing, which at a certain point is copy editing. It is very much kind of trying to clean that up from a grammar point or a form and structure part of it. And I always found that really fascinating because I came away from that whole process thinking, well, I just write like a 5-year-old. That's where I came away from. You're looking for all these complexities in your writing, you're like, they're just not there. And so I can sort of write for humor and write sort of entertainment wise, but anything beyond that, I sort of do not have the experience for, is what I would say, more so than anything else.
Practice, and actually reading can teach you a lot.
Yeah.
What about you? Varsha writes. Varsha has been writing in the Writer's Battleground.
I started writing very recently, but I've been a reader since the very beginning, I guess. I don't know, I was in like 3rd grade or something. We were traveling from Chennai back home, and my mom wanted to keep me shut up, so she bought me a book, and it worked. I was quiet the whole train ride.
It worked.
So I can't think of a time when I wasn't reading, and my favorite times to be a reader was when I had friends to discuss books with. Harry Potter played a big role in that. Like, we just keep quoting things at each other. I grew up with Harry Potter. I'm one of those people. And
what, young?
So that was really nice. And then I had a friend at my first job with whom I used to love talking about books, and we did exactly the kind of thing that I am trying to do with Bright Threads, the series that I started on my channel recently, which is like take our favorite quotes and talk about them. So yeah, I missed all of that, and then I found BookTube, and I wanted to talk about it. It's like what I used to do with that friend I had. I won't name him because I don't think he's comfortable with that, but it's like what I do with him. So I'm going to try and make friends here. So yeah, and thanks to the Page Tuning Forum, I found some friends to actually talk about books with. And then the quotes thing I'm doing on my own, but I'll bring people on eventually.
Well, for those of you who are just starting out, there is one book that I recommend to everybody who's just starting out. If I had had my hands on that book 10 years earlier, I would have been published 10 years sooner. It's called Techniques of the Selling Writer. It's by Dwight V. Swain. It is published by the University of Oklahoma Press in trade paper. You can probably get it as an ebook. There is no other book like that. It literally opens the toolbox, shows you how to construct fiction sentence by sentence, and when to use a flashback, when to use narrative technique, when to use dialogue, and when not to use any of those techniques, when it is going to be like a stone in the road. And it really clarifies how to write fiction in a way that I had never seen before that. The book is listed on my website under Tips for Writers if you missed it in the recording. But yeah, it's a super, super resource. And it doesn't dictate style. It just shows you construction, how you construct the concept on the page, how you hold the tension sentence to sentence, what you are accomplishing in a scene, and why you're choosing those techniques to tell that way. So beat by beat, it gives you literally the toolbox of how to lay the sentences down in order. And very, very easy to read. You can figure out what it's trying to say pretty quickly, can keep it as a reference book, but it's a mighty, mighty, mighty tool to help your learning along and advance you. So I do recommend that book because, I read so many manuscripts or books by up and coming writers, and they are so used to watching television, sometimes they're over heavy on the dialogue, and people forget that when somebody's talking, the action stops. Writing is linear. It's not like the TV screen where dialogue can happen with motion and action in the background. In a book, when you're talking, the writing, the action stops. So there's a correct moment to use dialogue to do a scene and a correct moment to use action and narrative without dialogue or very sparse dialogue. And that's a skill that I find getting lost in this heavily visual internet TV streaming age, because people don't read books and really understand the difference between narrative and dialogue and when to use what. So it's something to think about.
Yeah. I think one thing, I will look that up. I did see it on your website, but I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. But one thing that I've had difficulty with is, I know people say you can learn from reading, but I don't know how to interpret what I'm reading and figure out what's happening well, and why I like what I like, and then use it to apply to my own writing. That's something that I've had difficulty with. So I was wondering if you had any tips on that, like what you look for when you're reading to apply to your own writing.
You read to have an experience that's given to you by somebody else. But the minute that you read those words, that experience becomes yours. So if you're trying to analyze why something worked for you, you don't look at the words first. You look at the emotions. How did it make you feel? How did it make you feel? What did you take away from that experience? What did you think about? So forget the words. Look at the impact on yourself, because you're the mirror of what those words did for you. It wouldn't work the same way for me, but it would work for you. So once you understand this scene evoked this emotion in me, or made me remember this memory, well, that memory will be attached to an emotion. And that emotion will have a flavor of your childhood or your whatever experience that it's attached to. Make a list of that. Now go back to the words and see, why did those words evoke that? How did the author do that alchemy that brought that piece of experience into your life? Because there were touch tones in your own experience that those words rang off of. So that's what I would suggest that you try. Is writing is all about making your reader feel. So how did you feel? That's what you take away.
I like that. I'll try that. Thank you, Janny. Holly, do you do anything differently than that?
I mean, I think one thing that I would say is to try and bear in mind with when you are reading, you don't always realize how much you're taking in subconsciously as well, because you're obviously reading the story, but then subconsciously you're also taking in things like themes and kind of conversation points. And I think sometimes it's not until you sit down to write yourself, and you could be like, halfway through a manuscript, 50,000 words in, and all of a sudden that subconscious will kick in. And then you might not even relate it to a particular book or story that you've read, but suddenly those subjects that you want to talk about in your style and your voice will suddenly come to mind, and it will be from being exposed to that through other stories. So sometimes it's something you don't even think about or know that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's something I hear a lot of readers say is like, I'm very much a character-based reader, or I'm a very much this type of reader. And I've read a lot of books, and I still don't know what type of reader I am. I know when things are done well, and when things, the character-based stories that are done well, I like, I like that. And then I've read other character-based stories and went, I don't like that. So I find that very hard to pigeonhole myself. And it's only when we do our discussions that we're talking about, when you're asked, you think about, right, what am I going to say for the next hour and a half that we're going to record about this? Like, what do you actually think about this book, that you actually sit and go, oh, that particular thing is the bit that I liked, or that's the bit that I don't like. It actually forces you to stop and reflect on what you've read, and not just kind of churn through stuff and actually see what value there is in the stuff that you've been consuming.
Yeah, that I'm sure that will help eventually in the long run, the sitting down and thinking about it. I think having a channel and being deliberate about having discussions and sitting down and thinking about what I liked about a book, that's definitely been helpful. I think I'm noticing more when I'm reading, and that has to help when I have been writing short stories, but like I want to eventually write a book. I'm sure that will help eventually. Yeah, I like that. Thank you. That's all very helpful advice.
Holly, what has it been for you in the Writers Battleground, helping people, or like, helping hone skills in people's writing abilities? Seems like that's been, I mean, everyone who's been involved has really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been great fun because I don't read a lot of books, and I know that's like a cardinal sin as a writer, but I just have a lot of like attention difficulties, and just reading is something that I have to really focus on. So for me to have lots of short stories, and I like poetry and essays and things like that, I find really interesting. And because so many of the stories have been so different, they're all different voices, different styles. We've had some science fiction, we've had some comedy, we've had a bit of like military fantasy. So it's been really interesting to see all of that coming from people who all sit there and go, no, I'm not a writer. It's like, well, actually, you're kind of proving your own point wrong here. Yeah, I mean, I've loved it. And in terms of helping people, I don't think I've particularly been that helpful. I mean, I'd love to be. And I have said that I'm always happy to chat to people, talk through their stories. And, people take me up on that sometimes if they feel the need. But I think it's a great way for people to find their own kind of voice and their own style, and it's a no pressure environment. Everyone's in it for the fun of it. So yeah, it's been really nice to see the stories come through every month.
Yeah, we have to look into the annual ebook. It'd be fun to do like a collection, maybe not an anthology, but like a magazine kind of thing.
Yeah, well, you need to do that because you put it up on Writers Battleground, it's considered published.
Yeah.
When you post it on the internet, otherwise I would happily participate with you guys. So putting it into an anthology and then registering the copyright for that entire anthology is one shot, protects what you put up, actually. So it would be a wise idea. Or make your Writers Battleground private, that people who aren't participating can't get in, then that's not available to the public, and that would save your copyright. So what you're doing is really, really wonderful. But if you understand the push and the pull of copyright law, you want to sell that short story later to a magazine, well, it's already been published because it was in public on the internet and anyone could access it. So I don't want to throw cold water on anybody's anything, but you sort of might want to think about that. If you're getting some work that's like, wow, that is really good, you don't want to throw it away and have somebody else publish it because you put it in public domain. You don't want somebody else putting it up on Amazon or something and running away with all of your hard work. So it's my protective instincts speaking up here, being a mother hen, slapping down.
I hate to bring it up, but I wonder how this works. I'm not sure if anybody knows, but how does that work with AI? Because I know like they search social media platforms, they collect data off of social media. How does that work? If somebody posted on a platform, can AI still?
How good is the security of your site? Can AI get in there without registering for your site? If it can, are you using Google Drive? Google Drive uses everything that's posted to Google Drive is considered fair game. When you read their terms of service, you will discover they've shut that legal door that you can have any recourse, because they're giving you that platform for free because they're getting something back. It scares me. I look at like social media and I'll see post pictures of you doing your favorite thing, post pictures of you every decade of your life, post pictures of you. You are sorting the data of your development specific to you. You're giving it to the data companies. And if they want to make a deep fake of you doing something at 20, they have all the data they need. And plus all of the Flickr sites and all the family photos, everything you put on Facebook. So it just horrifies me a little watching how people give away their lives for free to these companies that can literally do anything with it. And it may not matter if you think you're Joe Nobody right now, but what if you publish a major hit novel and you're suddenly a hugely public figure and somebody, so be careful what you put out there. I know it's fun and I know those kind of posts get a lot of engagement, but we're stepping into the age of AI and there are no protections. There are no fences up. There are no boundaries. Those boundaries are going to be drawn right now. And a lot of it's going to be drawn by how much the public is willing to hand them over. What was it? I used to follow a guy who was in intelligence and he called Facebook FS book because you were handing all of your personal data to hostile interests to use any way they wanted. And they could target you with something that you might believe because they know exactly what you like and don't like and what you're apt to discount and what you pay attention to. So I grew up where there was no social media. So I'm used to not having that instant replay of everything or all my neighbors commenting on something or liking it because we didn't have that. So it's a different time period. And I wish that it was being handled more responsibly, but from what I've seen, it's run way ahead of where people can see that they even need to put on the brakes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Steve, on your forum or where you're running, can AI get in there? You would have to ask whoever is hosting that platform or whoever's writing the code. I know I ask my web guy stuff like that all the time. And he says, yeah, I can take an image that you load up onto your website and I can shatter it into pieces and it only assembles, but that won't stop somebody doing a screenshot that an AI will eventually figure out to do that. So it's one of the reasons that I am not posting artwork anymore on my social media unless it's got type on it. I'm not posting photographs that I take of wildlife. I run camera traps because the geological data is, the location data is still in that. Yeah. And even though I've turned that off on the display and turned that off on the camera, it is still embedded in the image and they can still mine it out. And I don't want my property owners having some person with a gun come and hunt what my camera caught on their property. So I really miss sharing that, but I can't anymore. It's just not safe for them and it's not safe for the animals. So it's a cautionary tale, and I don't know where it's going to settle out, but I think that's up to us to decide where we want the boundaries to be drawn and fight for it. But I fear very much for young people starting out, young artists, young writers, wanting to go into creative field. If this stuff takes over and actually makes it so that it's harder to work, we'll become a niche market again.
Yeah.
We were a niche market when I was growing up. Science fiction and fantasy was definitely rejected by the mainstream. Hardly anyone read it. Hardly anyone. And the internet actually connected us to people who did, or conventions did. Now it's become so mainstream that that's changing it too. So I don't see that AI is going to replace us, but I do see that it will cram us back into a niche market, and you can't put food on the table or pay your bills in a niche market. And to me, there is a value of spending your lifetime developing your skill set. I'd hate to see that lost. Yeah, you can do writing and drawing as a second job, but why not do it as your primary job and develop as far as you can with your whole lifetime's worth of value put behind that? We lose something if we throw that away.
It's so true. Like, it's hard enough to be a success at anything in life. And it's one of the things that I tell the kids is that I don't care what it is you want to be, but if you desperately want to be that thing, you've got to put everything, you've got to do the things that other people aren't prepared to do for it. So if you're talking about writing or artist or something, it has to be your full-time vocation if you're really going to be the best that you can be at that one thing, because lots of other people will do it part-time. Lots of people will do it and they might have talent or whatever the other intangibles may be. But if you really want to be a success at anything and you want to devote yourself, you can make a success for yourself, but it takes the whole.
Well, you're asking somebody to spend their lifetime looking at what you're doing. They're spending their valuable time to enjoy what it is that you put out. So you better make it worth their time, because they could be doing something else. So I look at it as taking your audience seriously and not playing with them. and respecting them, respecting their intelligence and their choices. So I feel that that's a privilege one lives up to, not the other way around. You're not the person standing on the pedestal dictating to them. They're the ones that you are privileged to be speaking to, and make it worth it. Make it worth their time.
Yeah, the deep fakes, there's been more and more has been happening the last couple of weeks with those, and it's pretty scary. There's some crazy stuff going on. So you just never know what kind of bad actors are out there, or just could be anybody. So it's a little concerning.
Well, I guess, Steve, you would see more of that than anybody, because you are working with so many different facets of the internet, with so many platforms that you put out there, so many channels. And also you work with gaming, and you work with videos, and you work with blogging, and you work with your forum. And so you are really on the leading edge of seeing the impacts all the way across a wide band of the community. So in a way, you could be a bit of the canary in the coal mine, because you will spot trends before that they're fully apparent to everyone else.
Yeah, that's scary.
Or the first dead, if you're going to use that analogy.
When I'm dead, you know to worry. Yeah.
I do think we're in a bit of a tough place now, because I think the best way to deal with an awful lot of this is to give it exposure in place. You know, you've got to expose it for what it is and what it isn't. But at the same stage, in doing so, you don't want to give it too much legs. So it's like a finely balanced kind of edge. Like it's I talked about last week, obviously in the Friday conversation, but the episode with the cover winning the art contest for SBFBO.
Yeah, that was a sad mess.
It's sad, but in another way, it completely exposed that whole world and that whole market in 24 hours by giving it.
But I'm still seeing people slide stuff off as, yeah, this was drawn by a human. And I look at it and I go, no, definitely, it's got the fingerprints all over it of it wasn't. But the digital age has changed everything, because it used to be a painting was a painting, and you had to photograph it, and you had to make plates, and you had to have a printing press to make it happen. This was a hugely laborious process. A pixel is a pixel is a pixel. How in 50 years with all this electronic media are we going to know what was the original and what wasn't, even in a book? Because it can be changed. Whereas if you have a painting, or you have a manuscript or a physical book, it's a lot harder to erase history. So yeah, a pixel is a pixel. And the thing that also gets me is a pixel on a screen looks different, but if you have a painting and you have it hanging in a room, every time the light changes, every time the season changes, every time the ambience of that room changes, the impact of that painting shifts. But a pixel is a pixel is a pixel. You put it on the screen and it's frozen, unless you physically change the tonation of it and the color scale. So yeah, it's a weird time where stuff is so fluid now. It's so ephemeral. I had stuff that a publisher took back the rights because the letter that reverted those rights to me was on fax paper and it bleached, and there was no record. And the technology where I'd recorded it was an old computer, and the platform, the computer to fax, where you used to do a fax, you'd write a fax on the screen and then it would convert it to fax and send it out. All that technology's gone. So I literally had no proof. My agent had no proof. Wow. There was no proof left to go back to the publisher and say, you reverted those titles 15, 20 years ago. You do not have the right to reprint them. And their lawyers were like, prove it. So watch out, if you have a copyright and you register it, keep it in paper and put it in the vault. Because the technology changed so quickly, you can't access what you did because that platform is gone. I don't want to be the doom and gloomer. Look at everybody's like, oh, you wrecked my Friday.
Happy Friday. I was going to say, I'm just back from Italy, a bit of a change in experience, but you can see 1,000 pictures of the Colosseum or, around Florence or Venice, but there's nothing like turning a corner and being confronted with something like that face to face. It can go from something you think is going to be predictable to being a kind of almost religious experience, to see something that you've seen a lot in person and get a size scale and context and all that other things. It changes the piece of artwork that you thought you knew, or the sculpture that you thought you knew wholly. And the same thing goes for paintings and all that kind of stuff. When you see that, you basically see the brush on the canvas sometimes of how it was applied, and you go, oh wow, there's something. It changes the experience.
They say it's a thing that people actually see the David and have a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. We went and saw the David, and absolutely, it is totally not like seeing a photograph or a copy of a statue. Completely. We didn't have a heart attack, but something in the real is absolutely, there's no replacement for it. Yeah. Amazing. So what were you doing in Italy?
I was just on holiday. We did a cruise. So I got to do Florence one day, Rome the next day, and then Pompeii the next day. Like, what a 3 days in a row. Exhausting, but also like overload of like sensory experience and all that kind of
Italy's
stuff.
fantastic.
But it is just it's just an incredible.
You ever go back, you want to go to the Lucca Comics and Games Convention. It takes place in Lucca, and it's a medieval city that has like a wall all around it with trees growing on it. The wall's been there for so long, and 100 and something thousand people come to this convention, and they take over the entire town. The entire town for a week becomes this massive comics, games, and science fiction and fantasy convention. And it's just mind-blowing. They put tents up everywhere they can fit between all these medieval buildings. Every single public space in that town is taken up by this convention. And it's all people coming from Italy, some from Europe, but mostly it's Italians. And you will never eat so well in your whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about a festival of the arts for us. What an amazing experience that is. If you're going to go to Italy, try that one out.
That sounds like my ideal week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's amazing. You watch the people dragging the suitcases in. You know, it's like the thing starts and this flood of young people come into the city. And it's just like we watch this thing and our heads were just spinning. Every day, there was the whole streets were full of trash from the newspapers that they put out to say what activities were going on. And every night that town loved that convention so much, they cleaned up every scrap of trash. And the next day the place would be destroyed again. And then it would be cleaned up again. And we're just sitting here watching this going, we can't believe what we're seeing. Unreal. It was an experience in itself, but I do highly recommend it. And the town is beautiful. Goes back to Roman times. The Roman Forum and the Roman Arena are still there.
Yeah, I think that one probably would be a bit too much of a high ambition for my first con. I might have to lower my expectations because, I mean, for me, much like many kind of authors that came about in the last few years and kind of put out debuts in the last 2-3 years, I've never been on the con scene because I launched my first book just as we were going into COVID restrictions. So, you know, I've never met, I think I've met like 2 authors in real life. Like, to me,
Yeah, you have.
I speak to online.
3.
You're going to Glasgow, aren't you? Of course you're going to Glasgow.
So, this year is going to be my first year going out to cons and meeting readers, other writers. So that's going to be a really great experience.
EasterCon and then OctaCon in Ireland. Oh my God, you'll get completely smashed on Guinness. Guinness does not travel well. If they put it in a thing and move it, it does not taste right. But Guinness in Ireland is a mind-blowing experience. So yeah, go to OctaCon. It's amazing. And a lot of writers go there. There are quite a few that show up. And the British Fantasy Society that does EasterCon. And the British Fantasy Society's convention, I guess they have a fantasy con. Well worth going. You'll meet a lot of people that way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking for. I mean, so far I've been to one con in my entire career, and that was I just got it in before all the lockdown started, and it was like a local one, and it was on a farm, and it was it was so surreal because you'd be walking around and you'd be going, okay, well, there's a stormtrooper and there's a cow and there's predator and there's a sheep. My only experience so far.
I wonder what the cows thought.
I think they were probably as confused as everyone else was, but it was great. Just very surreal.
Don't knock farms. The biggest music festival we have in Britain is in a farm every year, so Glastonbury's is big news.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was so disappointed to find out they weren't doing it the following year. I would have come back.
You'd been shopping all year for appropriate clothing and stuff.
Well, Glasgow is deadly because the last Worldcon they had in Glasgow, you sat down for your panel and they would come and go down the line. In fact, this was a tradition of British conventions. They would go down the line with the panelists and ask what you want to drink, and they would bring you any single malt scotch you wanted. Now, if you did 3 panels in a morning, by noon, you were gone. You were just gone. So you want to learn the secrets of these people's careers, go to Glasgow. But yeah, it made for some really funny things that happened. Don accidentally gestured too hard on one of his panels and he knocked over his scotch, and he's sitting here crying and trying to scoop it back into a shot glass with a business card. And the convention is like cracking up. So the Concom brought him a tray full of shots. So he was wasted by the time he left that panel. And I imagine that Scottish hospitality has not changed that much. Yeah. So I hope we can get to Glasgow. I don't know if we'll make it, but
sounds like a very Glasgow thing to do. To make sure you try and get the scotch back in the glass somehow.
Yeah,
most of the rest of the world would write it off as a bad experience. We're like, but no, it can be salvaged. I know a guy. He can do it. Thankfully for me,
I played competition bagpipes for 45 years. So yeah, I could give you some Scottish stories that they know how to drink, they know how to hold it, and they know how to party.
It's a close hop for me. I shall be there next year. Yeah, next year. Yeah, next August, I guess, something like that.
So yeah, when do we get to have a big convention in India? Or some other place?
Good question.
Yeah, it'd be really cool.
Yeah, I don't know if they do any. I think I don't even remember seeing a lot of sci-fi fantasy. I used to shop in bookstores a lot when I was growing up, and we don't even have specific sci-fi fantasy shelves. I went to some when I was there recently, and it only had the most recent releases. So I think we have to pretty much shop online. I feel like sci-fi fantasy scene is not as big as it is here, but we got to change that. I know there are some Indian authors now writing based on Indian mythology. That's really cool. I'm excited about that. So yeah, and hopefully it'll change and we may have that big convention soon.
It just takes one person to start it. That's all I'm saying.
That's it, yeah.
One person to get the ball rolling. And then a lot of people to help.
A lot of people to help. That's key.
Yeah. Paramedic could do a convention, all the books that I hate, run over about a 3-week period. Paramedic part of the company. That'd be so good.
Strong opinionated reader.
Indeed.
Steve, was it your conversation that I went into? I gave that book to Mallory, or was that somebody else's discussion?
It would have been somebody else's, yeah.
It was a standing joke. I don't do terrible reviews. I don't knock down my peers because I'm grown up enough to know that not every book was written for me. So in general, if you ask me in private, I will tell you what I thought, but it's strictly to me. In public, I don't bash my peers. But I used to have an inside joke, and that was, oh, that book. What a wonderful book. I gave it to Mallory. And it has a story behind it. So if you ever see me say I gave that book to Mallory, you will know. Mallory was a red squirrel who was born off season. She was born late in the year in the fall. And I had a carriage house apartment on the property of an author, Daniel P. Mannix, and I had to climb up because the windows were old colonial and all the glazing was falling out, and I had to put plastic over the windows to keep the draft from whistling straight through the apartment because frankly the toilet would freeze. Literally, I had to salt the toilet to keep it running when it got below 10 degrees. So I would be up a ladder putting the plastic on, and it would be getting dark because it was November and the days were getting shorter, and I felt these little feet on my back, and I turn around and there's this baby red squirrel barely out of the nest walking on my back, and it's near freezing at night, and I had no idea where the nest was. So I brought her inside so she didn't freeze to death, because having watched the squirrels on this property, the baby reds are really, 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 really brave. They're really stupidly brave. You find them, they fall out of trees all the time. They get themselves in trouble. They die like flies because they're so curious and intelligent. They can't contain themselves until they learn better. And some don't make it. So Mallory came to live in the apartment, and I found where her nest was, and I tried to release her 4 days later, but she was having no part of it. She climbed under my sweater and said, "I'm warm here. I'm not leaving." So I figured I'd wait for a warmer day and try to release her again. But in the meantime, the owls discovered the squirrels and they ate the rest of the babies. So this was a late hatching. So I said, all right, well, she's living in the apartment for the winter. So Mallory came to live with me in my studio. And every morning I would let her out of her cage and she would mess around my entire apartment, enjoy herself to death. And every night she would go to sleep on top of the expansion tank for the water system. She built herself a nest up there with shredded Kleenex paper, what have you. And every year she would select a book off my bookshelf, a paperback, and she would eat it. She would shred it into confetti, not one word left intact. And the only way I knew which book was hers was the spine. She didn't like the glue, so I could read the author's name in the spine. So I knew that if I didn't give her a book every 6 months, she was going to take one. So if I gave a book to Mallory, that meant it got a shredding review. To the point where not even my worst enemy could read that book. So yeah, she lived in my studio for 10 years. She was a great deal of fun and a barrel of laughs. But yeah, if you ever hear me say, yeah, I gave that book to Mallory, you know. It's a book that was so awful, I would not even give it to the library. And of course, I don't have a pet squirrel anymore. Now I do give all the books to the library, no matter what I think of them. But so yeah, if I gave it to Mallory, now you know. She was named Mallory, by the way, because she failed. She was named after the climber that failed to climb Everest. I said, "You're useless as a wild squirrel." So she was named after Mallory.
I can't think of the last book that I read that I disliked so much I'd want somebody to eat it.
I can think of one, I think.
Well, I don't have a squirrel anymore, so I can't oblige you. It's been 30 years. I gave a book to Mallory.
I like that story because it's like, it sounds like the opposite of what you actually mean when you say, I love that, what a wonderful book, I gave it to Mallory. Oh, Steve, you're muted.
That's what happens. I haven't had enough coffee. No, we talked a little bit about it on the forum, but I'm curious about like author etiquette and giving reviews for their books, and if that's just something that is just kind of frowned upon, giving negative reviews for other authors, or is it, you know, if you read something and it's a 3-star or less, do you just avoid writing a review for it, or is there kind of like a code, like an unsaid code, unspoken rule?
You talking old time or new? Yeah, Holly.
Either one.
I mean, as far as I've been made aware, there's not a specific code. I think there's a certain etiquette in that, you know, like Janny said, you're smart enough as a writer to realize that, you know, not every book that you read is going to be for you, and your book is not going to be for every reader. So I think there is a fine line between bashing someone who is a peer and also being able to give a constructive review. So I think there are ways that people do that. For me personally, I don't put bad reviews for anything. If I don't like a book, I just don't read it. So I will DNF stuff. And like Janny mentioned earlier, if an author wants to talk through that feedback or why that book didn't work for me, then I will do that in a personal conversation with them that we can get something from and kind of use as a learning tool. You know, if I don't like a book that I pick up, I think that's just me. You know, 100 other people might think it's great. 1,000 people might think it's great. I do think that there are authors out there who do react quite negatively if you don't like their book, you know, and people are going to get hurt. They're going to get upset if you don't like what they do. But that's, you know, it's part and parcel of it. That's the nature of what we do. And I think you kind of, you know who's going to take critique well, who's going to take feedback well. And if people don't want it, then they don't have to have it. You know, it's feedback is only useful to people who want it, as far as I'm concerned.
If you think about old time etiquette before the internet and before anybody and their uncle could review anything that they wanted, and you don't know who's writing that review, they could be 8 to 80. And before reviewers pumped themselves up and said, I'm just giving them a critique. Review is not a critique. Honestly, it's not. The old days was, the etiquette was, you said nothing. You sent a book out to be read by somebody, and if they said good, bad, or nothing, you never asked them, did you read it? You never asked them why they didn't like it. You never, ever commented on a review because it was not going to go well for you. It was going to create a problem. And honestly, Holly's correct. The best thing to do is silence, because silence smothers something faster than anything else. A negative controversial review will actually sell your book. So I do not comment on reviews. I think I've held that standard for my entire life, except for twice. Once was because the person said outright that I was having an affair with Ray Feist. And I said, excuse me? He lives in California. I live in Florida. And at the time I started with daughter, it was Pennsylvania. I said, that's a little bit longer than nature. Nobody's is that big. And the other time was because somebody made a comment and they used a word that was just, are you sure that meaning of that word is what you mean? And it wasn't. They had not known the word. And so they had inadvertently used a word that was, and I did it in private in such a way as, are you sure that's what you meant? If you did, it's fine. I won't mess with you. My attitude today with reviews is you don't know where that review is coming from. You don't know what happened to that person today, whether they burned their tongue on the coffee, whether they had a father who was abusive to them, whether they were told by some teacher, never do this, and you did that in your book. I mean, I played with experiments back in the day when people wrote you physical letters, you know, before the internet. And I got 2 hate mails in one day on the ending of the Empire series, where one person was absolutely horrified that the main character would divorce her husband in favor of her first love. And the other one absolutely horrified that she married somebody else other than her first love. And how dare I turn this character into a WHORE. So I simply took the letter, switched the envelopes, and mailed it back with a little sticky note on it that said, which one of you do I piss off?
Very nice.
Graphic example of why you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
So now what do I look at when I see reviews? I don't know the person. They could be an idiot. They could be really smart. They could have a chip on their shoulder. I try to respond positively if there is grace to do it. And I'll simply say, if they ask me, what did you think of my review? I'll say, thank you for taking your time. I respect the fact that you felt that way. And the responses I get back are astonishing. One person wrote me back and said, And this is after they provoked me to respond. Okay. I never touch it. They wrote me back and they said, "Oh my God, I reread the review and it was really horrible. And I realized I'd had a terrible day and I was just lashing out to make you feel bad too, because I felt so bad." And I'm like, whoa, that's educational. The second person wrote me back a 5-page letter doubling down on how nasty their review was, because my father taught me when I was 10 not to do what you did in your book, not to write that way, that I shouldn't use the words that you use, or I shouldn't have a style. I should write. So she wasn't yelling at me. She was yelling at me because I took my freedom she never had the courage to take back. And so it developed an empathy for where that person is coming from. And when you look at what they're doing, you disappointed them. What is hate? A hateful review is love disappointed. They picked up your book. They really wanted to like it. And they were disappointed because they didn't love it. And that's got to be your fault. It can't be about them. But a review is really about you. If I write a review, it's about me. It's about how I felt about that book. So I try to look at a quote negative review is it's not about me. It's about that person's reaction to what I did. And that can have a million reasons why that person felt the way they did. But when they try to get up on their huge pedestal and puff up their chest and say, my review is to instruct you and be a critique, well, now I'm going to take issue with that, because where do you have the experience and the expertise to even know what you're talking about? Are you critiquing me because of a subjective thing that you took away from my book, given that now the book is a partnership? It's no longer just my words. It's my words plus you. It's my words plus what you take away from it. So are you critiquing me for how you felt? Do you even know the difference between good writing or writing that's inept? Do you even understand the reasons why you make a decision in fiction to focus on this scene and not that scene? So there's so many factors that go into why an author tells a story the way they do. And there's so many reasons why a reader would want it differently. And you're available. You're the pretty face behind the cover. Who else can they attack? So I try to be forgiving of what goes on. And I try not to stir up their already stirred up feelings, because all you're going to do is create antipathy. And in the internet, a lot of that stuff can get out of control and it can come back to you in ways you really don't. So just don't say anything. Silence is golden. You know, that old rule that said, is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it kind? And then the kicker, is it necessary? So is it ever necessary for me to say anything to a reviewer? And are they qualified to quote critique a work? There's some people I would listen to very keenly on how a work was written and where they actually have the knowledge to do it. I would listen to A.P. Canavan all day long. He knows his stuff. But would I listen to somebody who writes a review and says, you just used a thesaurus to write this entire book? Really? Really? So it's about them. It's not about me. So I try to let it go that way. Anybody else have feelings on that?
It's so interesting. I think this whole idea of how reviews are connected to our emotions, right? So if I was to write or read a book, hate read it to the point that I was so angry that I felt I had to write a really negative review, that's a lot of time to wallow in negative emotions. That is not healthy as a viewpoint to live, even to reflect on negative emotions to the point that you're going to formulate a response to it. And at that point, I think a lot of us, and as Holly has described there, and you've described there, Janny, you just kind of go, I don't want to be part of that, or I don't want to be part of that emotional circle that I close myself by writing a review and publishing it publicly so that somebody will then respond to it. I think you're somebody that's looking validation for the negativity that you're feeling either in your personal life or whatever you've done that's been suspended for a long time. So like only write positive reviews. I'd just be, I've so little time to read or do all those things. Regardless of how many streams that appear on it, I don't actually have that much time. So only spend your time doing things that are positive for you. Only spend time doing things that are fulfilling for you in some way. And one of the great things that I was taught by, I can't remember who did it many years ago, that it said to me that often negative emotions are a choice. Sometimes they're not. Things like grief, etc., come upon you and you have no choice and there's a process to go through. But a lot of the time, if you're experiencing negative emotions, they're a choice that you're making for yourself to either wallow in or feed them or doing it. Stop. Just stop from yourself and concentrate on doing something else. You can channel it in ways, you can do things, but only concentrate on things that are positive for you. And there's nothing better for all the limited time that I have, that if I'm going to do a review for something, I'll only do reviews for books that I think I really loved.
See, I have a different look on that. I don't think a negative emotion that I would feel would be a bad thing. I use those as an opportunity every time, because wiping it away and say, don't even think about it, just dismiss it. That's dismissing. Why did you feel that way to begin with? That negative emotion shot a spark off of something that you believed, or that was hurtful, or there was some point of vulnerability. Why did that review set me off? And that's where the value comes, because if you take the time to sort out, why did that person who had spouted off about my book make me feel bad, it will tell you something about your own development and your own self that you can turn to something positive, because underneath of that reason that it made you angry will again be that love disappointed. What part of love just got slammed and slapped you down? And then when you reach that, you get that little nugget, you can grow that and switch it to a positive emotion and say, this is a worthwhile to be angry about, and here's what I can do about protecting that part of myself. Or this isn't even worth my time of day because I'm angry because it was something my brother did to me when I was 2 and it woke that back up. Well, that's behind me. I don't need to listen to that 2-year-old person's upset anymore. So I always take a negative emotion and see if I can find what sparked it. And if nothing else, it will be food for writing later on, because there will be an underlying human facet to what made me angry.
I was going to ask a question, but I've answered. I know the answer myself, because it's using negative emotions as part of a creative process, where I would often think creative processes is about expunging demons or using, shaping emotions into something else. So if I have a lot of negative emotions, I would use it for songwriting in the past, for instance, right? And some of the best music that I've ever written has come out of the fact from the really biggest depressions that I can find, and kind of channeling and using it as a therapy in some ways. So, but that's a 4-minute song or something that I wrote over a day and a half. Whereas to do that, to write a novel with, which I'm sure is a much, much longer process, I wonder if that's different. Then maybe yourself and Holly can speak to that, where you use negative emotions and kind of have a very planned out process where you kind of channel that into something much more longer thought out.
I always used to say there were 2 kinds of writers in my experience: the ones who had to have an upset in their life and that fueled their writing because they bounced off their negative emotions, and when that was taken away, they would stop. Or other ones that if the upset in life gets bigger than the character's upset on the page, they can't write. So I think you can look at that from 2 directions. I don't know, Holly, what would you have to say on that?
I mean, I've had some interesting conversations about this with other writers and people who are kind of working on books at the moment. For me, I think when I write, I do use a lot of my own experiences and negative experiences. But the most important thing for me is to have a distance of time between that experience and writing it. I mean, I found when I was, younger and I was writing poetry and songs and all the kind of angsty teenage stuff that you do, I was writing stuff when I was still in the middle of those emotions. They were still happening. I hadn't processed them. And the stuff I was writing, it was very emotional, but it wasn't cohesive. It didn't make sense. When I look back, I couldn't understand what I was trying to say with that writing. But then having that kind of distance of time has allowed me to first of all, heal from things. to grow, to learn about what happened, how it happened, what its effect on me was. And now when I write, I can look back on that from a completely different perspective and write in a totally different way. So I think some people can write while they're experiencing the emotions, but I personally, I have to be patient. I have to let that process happen. Then I can go back to it and I can get something valuable from it.
Yeah.
Varsha, do you think there's a cultural angle that's different?
I don't know that I can say about negativity in general, though. I don't know about personal negative emotions, but I know a lot of really good writing comes from people exploring bad things in history, like Rushdie and Midnight's Children, Arundhati Roy with her works. It was, and I think there was one, I think his works got translated to English, a person called Saadat Hasan Manto, who explored the partition of India to India and Pakistan. And those were like great pieces of literature. So there is something to be said of exploring negativity and using art to channel your anger, I suppose. And if I have I didn't think that I would write for pretty much my entire life. What's recently making me want to write is that I'm very angry at some political issues back in India, and I want to channel my anger into something more productive. So yeah, I haven't written enough to say one way or the other about negative emotions, personal emotions that can impact writing, but negativity towards like world events, that I think produces some great art. But I guess it's about, I feel like I've calmed down when I've been able to explore it in writing. Like I don't know if you could tell, Holly, but some of the stories I wrote were about some things that I was angry about. So yeah, it's helped to explore that and be less negative for sure.
Did you ever read the anthology Iraq Plus 100?
No, I'll check it out.
Whoa, that was an eye opener. It was an anthology created by an editor that asked Iraqi people to write short fiction, and it was bound together in one anthology, and they could write whatever they wanted. And seeing that side of their culture and the impacts and the things that made them angry and the things that stirred them up and how they presented their stories culturally was very, very interesting. It was an interesting anthology read, not always an easy one to read for a person from the West, but definitely did it leave an impression? Huge. So I find a lot of value in that, seeing that kind of where do stories come from culturally and how can we change each other if we're willing to take the time to read a book.
Yeah. And I really like what you said, Janny, about like stopping and exploring why you're feeling negativity. My husband has been listening to a lot of, I don't know, Vipassana. Have you guys heard of it? It's this sort of silent meditation camp that runs for 10 days. And it has a lot of philosophy attached to it. And my husband's really into that. And he likes to tell me to slow down and think about what's making me angry, because at the end of the day, I'm the one who's suffering. Like the people who are making me angry are fine, and I'm the one who's suffering from the negativity. So I really love that approach. It's something that I've been trying to apply and failing at, but my husband's there to help me out with it. But yeah, I like that. And I guess it might feed into writing eventually. So that's pretty cool.
I do think when we talk about like negative emotions and negative feelings, and especially in regard to writing, I think it's important to remember that what we're actually talking about is the things that come from those experiences. So the empathy and perspective and knowledge and understanding. I think you kind of almost get into dangerous territory, because then people start going into the the tortured genius realm, and art must have suffering. And when we say that, we don't mean that all artists have to constantly put themselves through pain and strife. What we mean is that you take those experiences that you have that make you angry, that make you sad, and you use that learning and that experience to then channel something into the work that you're doing. So it is a bit of a fine line, and I think it's important to remember that distinction.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
I personally never believed that artists need to suffer in order to create.
Yeah.
Look at some of the more beautiful writers that we have. Patricia McKillop, she doesn't write suffering into her work. And it's some of the most beautiful fantasy you will ever read. And it's some of the most intricate allegory. It really has a lot to say, but she doesn't do it with violence and battles and ugliness. The closest she came to it was the last book she did, the one about the bard. But so, I don't believe that suffering makes the artist, but I believe that there's a value in our individuality, and there's a value with expressing that. And there's a value with passing that on, because through that, you do build empathy. And what was it? There was a documentary made on 2,000 years worth of storytelling and how each culture has its stories, and it builds the contour of their beliefs. It builds the contour of what they value. It builds the contour of what they're dreaming to achieve. And the bottom line of this documentary, which was a wonderful thing, I think you used to be able to rent it. It's about a half an hour long or 40 minutes. Was if we knew their stories, we wouldn't have wars, because we would understand the culture and we would understand what the point of impact was that's creating the friction. And it would be much harder to attack that. And so without understanding the culture, you really don't understand the people. And when I was in my 20s, I spent every penny I had traveling. And I went to Russia just very soon after they put down the Iron Curtain and they allowed Westerners to even go in and see. I went to Korea. I went to Africa. I went as many places as I possibly could. And each one was an eye-opener, because I saw things culturally that did not fit with my upbringing, and it forced me to reassess everything. And it really helped me understand why we have some of the problems that we do. And I studied Arabic in college just because I wanted to get into a language that was completely different. And I realized very quickly, studying that language, it's incredible for describing emotion. It's amazing for writing poetry. It's absolutely useless for explaining hard, cold reason technology. You want to do technology, you got to learn English or German or some other language that suits that. And that explains so much about some of the misunderstandings that occur, because sometimes the language that the people are using doesn't have the concept at the peace table that you're trying to present. And so I don't know how I go full circle to what sparked this off, but writing as being, you have to suffer to write. Some of the greatest literature has come out of that, but some of the greatest literature also has sprung out of the beauty that the human race can also build. And it depends where your heart is coming from and what you have to say. And we're all different. What would it be like if everybody read the same book and considered the same things good or the same things evil? It would be pretty darn boring. And so when people say this has to be good or has to be bad, or they tend to oversimplify, I say, what use is a bird of paradise? And look how many species of birds of paradise are there. They're useless, or bowerbirds. Nature does these wild experiments, and they're really, really cool, and they enrich us. How much less we would be without that variety. So why not have that variety in our people, our cultures, our literature, our food, our interests, our values? The trick is learning from it, expanding ourselves instead of contracting and saying, good, bad, put this in the box. I don't want to deal with that. You don't have to love it, but you can look at it and then make a choice.
Jenny, who was the author you mentioned with the last book? She had a bard in her book, so I can add it to the description.
Patricia McKillop, one of the most beautiful, most poetic, most incredible writers ever. She had the same editor all her life. She published little tiny books through Ace. She got a lifetime achievement, but not a grandmaster. He recently passed away within the last few years. She used to show up at the International Conference on the Fantastic, and she was so quiet you'd almost not know she was there. But some of the most beautiful prose you will ever encounter, and they're very short little books. Most of them are standalones. Well worth digging up her work. She did one about the concept of fear in Allegory, Odd Magic, and it was mind-blowing. Yeah, hold them up. Hold them up.
Yeah.
She was way under celebrated. I have everything she ever wrote upstairs. Yep, Book of Atric Wolf. She wrote Alphabet of Storm. She wrote The Bell at Sealy Head.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote lots and lots of titles. Yep.
I read Forgotten Beasts of Eld. I loved it, and I went and bought everything she wrote. They're all standalones, which is awesome.
And the covers, I forget, what was the name of her cover artist? There's one that did nothing but beauty her entire career. She did not be suffering ever once. What's her name?
It says Kinuko.
Yeah, Kinuko Craft. There you go. Look at her artwork. Hold that up there. She just painted beautiful, beautiful things. And that was a facet of her soul that she left with us. And there's nothing ugly about any of her artwork.
Yeah, these are beautiful colors.
It's magical. So why not have both extremes?
And MacKillop's such a great North Antrim name. that's where it's from. It's from North Antrim here, from where I am. But I mean, negative emotions, positive emotions. I think the power of the arts, I think is up for a battle, and all the things we've been talking about, with AI and all the rest of the power and beauty of the arts as a vehicle for representing truth or generating discussion is something that we all really need to be protecting. And amongst all of the conversations that are there, we have a reliance on media, we have a reliance on social media, printed media, all of that kind of stuff at the moment. But art cuts through all of those things. And as somebody that has grown up as a child out of a conflict, in many ways, I see the representations that take those negative experiences and represent them positively, just as a vehicle to make people stop and think. So the people that were killed, I can think of murals where rather than paint murals of the people as they were when they died, they take the pictures of them when they're 7 and 8 years old and say, these are the people that were killed. And you just put that picture up and get people to think about people as people rather than as criminals or whatever they've done in life, and get them to think. There's a power and a message that goes with that beyond, a headline or a story, all the rest. And it's just there purposely put out there to make people think.
The last line in the movie, The Last Samurai, the last line where he's asked, how did he die? And the main character of the movie says, let me tell you how he lived. Yeah. Heck with the memorials. How did they live?
Yeah. And whether that's a book or it's art or song or theater or whatever it is, all of those things are probably more important now than ever for relaying messages and kind of getting people to think and reflect on what the important things in life are, or the things that we probably should be concentrating on rather than the things that we're being told to concentrate on.
Feels to me like there's a real war on empathy going on.
Yeah.
That people are overloaded and they want to back up and they want to simplify to escape, and they don't want to feel. And, people call it the anti-intellectual movement. They call it this, they call it that, but it really comes down to they don't want to empathize. They're running away from it. They're building barriers against it. And maybe that's always been true. I don't know.
I've been a big fan of P.G. Wodehouse my entire life, and recently I was listening to Summer Lightning on audiobook, and there's a foreword, is that what that's called, by Stephen Fry, in which he talks about how Wodehouse was in prison, and I think he went through a lot during the war, but he still wanted to make people laugh, and he did that. Like, his books I love. I've been listening to a lot of Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett recently, but P.G. Wodehouse was OG comedy writer. So, I love that you go through a lot and you still want to make people laugh, or you want to put a funny spin on not taking things too seriously, or like reminding us that there's things besides just the bad things that happen there. One show that I watched recently was Derry Girls. It's set in the time of conflict in Ireland. We loved that show. It was absolutely brilliant, and it's so funny and so full of heart. I love that show, and it's taking a time of conflict and putting a different spin on it. Like, we are more than just the bad things that happen to us, right? So I think there's many, many ways to tell stories, and a lot of them can be uplifting.
There aren't too many women that are known for writing comedy. Have you ever read Esna Friesner?
No, I
It's
want
a
to.
shame now. Esther Friesner is one of the very few female authors who writes comedy.
Esna Freezer.
Friesner,
ESPN.
Ferisner. She's still alive. Esther Friesner. Yeah, she used to do an anthology called Chicks in Chainmail, but she also has other books. And unfortunately, she's not terribly well known because women don't do comedy. But yeah, you might want to look her up for the fun of it.
Interestingly,
Yeah, I like that.
Dairy Girls is written by a woman
Yeah.
as well, Lisa McGee.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And the reason it works is because it's totally truthful. Like sometimes I watch shows like that, and Claire Keegan's novels as well. There's ones that I think about, and as soon as somebody walks into a scene, I know what they're going to say because I've seen that situation happen beforehand, or seen those situations develop, and it's, I don't know, it's the truthfulness and all of that stuff that really comes out, and that eventually what makes it funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
I love
what
that
do you do
show.
for comedy? You've been so quiet. What do you do for comedy? What do you do for comedy? You've been so quiet over there.
Oh, I'm trying to keep track of all these books and other.
Don't visit my house. You'll see more stuff that everybody's forgotten. More wonderful. Yeah, that whole Loftus stuff with it.
I'm a little bit picky with humor, with comedy. I tend to. I think I should have been born in the UK because I tend to gravitate towards more of that style of comedy, like the Guy Ritchie kind of self-depreciating humor, like that's in Holly's books that I loved about it. The dry, droll type of humor is my kind of thing. That's the kind of humor I gravitate towards. I'm pretty picky. Humor's hard in text. It's hard because I think a lot of it's about timing. So I think it's hard to pull off, but when it happens, it's nice. But yeah.
Reed Woodhouse. You want to talk about timing and humor? I gotta check out Esther Friesner. I've been looking for other writers who do out and out humor. I only know of these three, so I'll take recommendations.
Humor in books must be so difficult because, as you were saying, Steve, an awful lot of it, like conversation, comes down to time and certain choice of words, either lack of words or verboseness or otherwise. But in a book, you only get one shot at it. Either the line's funny or it's not.
I really like R.M. Melick, her Merrimack series, Tour of the Merrimack, but it's so American and overblown. I mean, it's so swaggering. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, or other people who aren't American might not laugh at it because they might read it too seriously. But it's sort of military fiction, and it's got a gun-toting Texan Republican idiot captain of this warship, but he's good at it and he's funny. And his XO is this incredibly beautiful woman that is so pretty the men can't handle it. And she's so smart and she uses it. And I break out laughing reading those books more than almost any other. But who's read them? She also wrote serious. She wrote a book called Jerusalem Fire that if you want to read her serious, you will never forget that book. It's very powerful. But yeah, I enjoyed that. But the humor was very American. So if you're willing to read caricature, and the fun part was it's space opera, but she builds it on the quantum. So literally each book, they encounter this alien artifact and these aliens that literally are manipulating the time stream. So each time you restart the next book in the series, the guy who was getting divorced from his wife, and the last one is tight with his wife, and this one that was falling in love with this other character, it's completely fallen apart in this one. So there's threads, but they keep getting interrupted and restarted in different places. Or one guy who's this complete yahoo who screws all the women, he dies very vividly in the first book, but he's alive in the second book. And so she plays with string theory in a way that's totally amusing.
Nice.
And she's got the basically United States fighting against this other planet where they have recreated the civilization of Rome. So they're Roman and they're heading on, and then they have this alien threat. And so it's wacky. It's just crazy, but it might not be for everyone. But the way she plays the characters and the caricatures of the cultural aspects just was very, very funny. Even though a lot of the things that she's satirizing, I don't agree with. It was just funny because she blew them up. So there's one you could try, but it might not work culturally. But I really enjoyed her tour of the Merrimack. I think there's like 4 or 5 books, maybe 6 in that series.
Yeah, I think I've got it open here on Goodreads. It's 6 books. Yeah.
So just, try the first one. And if you find it's funny, keep going.
Yeah.
But
I'll do
I
that.
could never predict her plots. That was for darn sure.
Yeah, I think I gravitate towards a lot of humor with words. I don't visualize a lot when I'm reading, so just funny situations are harder for me to find funny. But humor with words, I love. So I'll check this one out and see where it falls.
Yeah, my wife just does slapstick. That's the only type of humor that really grabs her. People walking in the doors, like I keep on turning to her when she laughs out loud at that stuff. I'm going, "You're an intelligent, educated person. Why is this the thing that gets you every time?"
I don't do slapstick that much, but one thing that always gets me is a well-placed slap. So there's this video called The Slap on the internet that I laugh at every single slap that happens in that video. But yeah, I'd find other physical humor that funny.
Well, I live with a husband who absolutely will not stop punning. He will stop punning when he's freaking dead.
Love a good pun.
Yep, he can do it when he's hungover. He can do it when he first wakes up. He can do it. And it's like, it's nonstop. So we have a lot of laughter over that.
Yeah.
What about you, Holly?
I mean, I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, humor-wise, I definitely steer towards the darker side of humor. I do think, as Steve mentioned, I do have the very kind of British attitude to humor, which is very kind of self-deprecating, and we're quite, I suppose, quite snarky is the best way to term it. I mean, I'm not saying that if you come to Britain that everybody is going to be really snarky, but there
might be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, I mean, I like the kind of Guy Ritchie movies. If you've ever seen any of those, the sense of humor that's in that. I do use a lot of gallows humor as well. I think that there's something very powerful about the ability to laugh at the ridiculous and the dangerous. And, in certain situations, I think the greatest weapon that you have is to still have the ability to be joyful and mirthful, even, as there's terrible things going on around you. I think it makes us human. It connects people. So I think sometimes, it can err on the side of there are times where it's not appropriate to be funny in those situations. But I think sometimes actually that little bit of humor in a terrible situation is just the light in the dark that people need to, be reminded that they are still alive. They are still here. They are still happening in the world.
I think it's so interesting that comedy is one of the things that's sort of at the forefront of social change. Comedians can say things that other people in life can't do it, commentators or all the rest, but they can make a joke about it and people go, "Oh, I really rebel against that, it makes me angry." And other people are going, "Yeah, but also there's truth in in that joke and the reason that you laughed at that and kind of doing that." I think of a lot of the most successful comedians are social commentary comedians, and getting us to really look at ourselves and examine society and why that's funny.
Yeah, Billy Connolly.
Yeah, Billy Connolly.
The gift of my pipe band
Yeah.
members. Yep. He gets me every time, especially when he starts going off on religion.
Yeah, exactly.
He's great. We got a lot of his DVDs.
He was one of the first comedians I ever watched one of the DVDs of, Janny, and I had to stop because my sides were so sore.
Break something.
And I remember it actually being, a lot of people probably not know, but Tommy Tiernan, I went to see a live show of his last minute. He's an Irish comedian, and I got a stitch in my leg from laughing so hard. And I was in the audience laughing, and people around me were really worried because every time that I laughed, it would be really painful. So I was part laughing and partly crying the whole way through the last half an hour of the show, as I was in such pain. But it was just so funny that it was like a joyful pain. Brilliant comedian. No, he's Tommy Tiernan's the dad of the Dairy Girls. Not the grandfather, but the dad.
Oh, the dad.
Jerry.
He's also a comedian.
Oh,
And-
he's one of the finest comedians that we've
Okay.
ever produced.
We looked up some by column. But we didn't finish watching them, but we will. He's our favorite character, column. But the dad, I've got to check that out.
Yeah, Kev McAleer, who's Uncle Colin, he's from around here. Let's just say a little bit. He's from up the coast.
You know what else is the best humor in the world? We have a little book. I'll go get it off the kitchen table, and I will open it at random, and I guarantee you will laugh. It's called Texas Crude. It's just colloquialism that Texans use, and they seriously do. I'll go get the book. It's one of our breakfast table favorites.
I want to go to Texas. There's something about Texas that calls me. Texas.
This is it. This is it. We loaned it to a movie guy, and he didn't give it back, and we had to get another one. So, okay, here we go. First page at random. Hit her in the butt with a sour melt lemon, and she goes wild. That means she has extremely low alcohol tolerance.
Very good.
Oh, here's another one. Dry spells. It's dry as a popcorn fart. That day it was as dry as a fish fart rolled in sand.
Oh.
Yeah, any page on this book, it will kill you. It will destroy you.
That's such a good idea. That's a good idea. Just have it in the kitchen table. So if anybody's just feeling a bit crap or down, they go, hold on, I'll be back in a second.
A $3.80 is a fanciful price tag used when one wishes to conceal the true price of an article.
I feel like this is something I'm going to have to get my mother-in-law for Christmas. That's perfect.
It's just unbelievable. Yeah, next time you eat a skunk, peel it first. That's a fart. Oh, yeah, it's by Ken Weaver. Illustrations by R. Crum. How to Talk Texan. We aren't very sophisticated at times in this house.
Yeah. Sometimes I end up very disappointed in myself with the things that I end up laughing at. I'm better than this. No, I'm not.
I want to save that line for a character. Being disappointed of the things that you laugh at.
Yeah,
that is a concept.
Yeah.
I needed this.
I feel like I should have said when Steve asked what kind of comedy is your style, there's actually two for me, and it's either dark comedy or really immature comedy. Those are the only two.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody who doesn't laugh at immature comedy unless they have a real stick up their butt.
Their bum. Yeah, for sure. There's a base level that everybody can sort of relate to.
Well, there's no culture on earth that doesn't get a poop joke.
Yeah, that's true. That's my youngest, when somebody was having an argument or somebody shouted, like I said, shouted at my eldest. She didn't like that tension that would be existing after an argument or somebody shouted. So she just used to walk around and just pull in and show a bit of her bum just walking past, because she knew that kind of stuff would just dissipate attention. And is now 13 and has taken that to the next level and stuff. It always dissipates like with really like immature humor or something, just kind of break things down, just break up kind of tension that's in the air.
Yeah, I read something on my Twitter feed the other day that just kind of dropped my jaw onto the table, and my mind won't let it go, which says, how immature we all think sometimes. But it was a parent saying, what do I tell my 77-year-old? She wants to be an author and she wants to write a book where farts come alive.
Bestseller.
Yeah, exactly. How do I tell her this won't sell? That was, I'm like, don't even try.
Well, isn't it like when your 3 or 4-year-old nephew comes in and he's trying to tell a joke that's completely unfunny, something about a cow in a field that has no punchline, but he laughs anyway, and you have to laugh along. That'll develop. That just comes with time and age. He'll put a poop in it somewhere, and people will soon laugh.
I don't know if any of you guys ever saw this, but there was a thing on the internet. I mean, it's a couple of years ago now, where this guy did a comic strip book online called Axe Cop. And it was basically, he'd asked I think his kid was about 3 or 4 at the time, to invent this character. So he invented this character, Axe Cop. And he put up this picture of it. And he got so many reactions from people who loved it. He went on and did a whole series where Axe Cop was fighting like dinosaurs with lasers on their heads that were like firing babies out of cannons and things. And it was absolutely brilliant because it was so chaotic, but it was so fun and so kind of, you know, child's imagination, so they can go anywhere. You know, it was great.
Isn't there that YouTube channel where they take like nursery kids stories 4 or 5 and animate them and make them into stories, and they're so ridiculous, they go in such weird and wonderful tangents that no author would ever go on, and everything, you know, has to have rainbows and unicorns in it at some stage, but they animate them for real, you know what I mean, as a very super serious kind of endeavor, but in some ways also celebrating the creativeness of youth, you know, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it says a lot about me as well that everyone else here has recommended really great books, and I've just recommended something called Axe Cop.
Like we all have a list.
Well, they put it on the shelf with Robot Chicken. I mean, there's a whole vein of humor that's about nothing but breaking the rules, and that's what made Robot Chicken work. They broke every taboo and every rule and every social more and every piece of etiquette in the entire book. And it was great. We laughed so hard. How to pollute your mind.
Holly, you mentioned about your board game collection. What's the next thing you're planning on trying?
Well, as you asked, we're going to probably have a little bit of a break from board games next week or two, because I don't know if you've heard the rumours, but a certain little game came out recently called Baldur's Gate 3, which I'm surprised you can't hear. My husband is actually currently doing his first run through of it this evening, so there's been a lot of explosions coming out of my kitchen, which I hope is the game. I haven't checked on him, so yeah, that's going to probably be quite a focus, because we're planning on we have like a regular gaming group that we play a lot with, so we do like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and things like that. So yeah, we're going to be doing a Baldur's Gate campaign. We're also midway through quite a few. I mean, I have so much D&D going on at the moment. I mean, I've literally gone from like playing once every 2 weeks to now I have like a group through Page Chewing that, you know, we play games, and we've got our regular group that's joining, and then other people. So yeah, it's a lot of the stuff I'm doing at the moment is online, but it's great because we have so many new people at the moment who have never had the chance to do like an RPG. Steve, we're waiting on you to join us at some point. No pressure, like.
I'll be observing.
But yeah, we will get back to the board games. So I think probably the next couple of posts I do will be more online RPG based, and then I'll go back to the charity shops and see what treasures I can find.
So are you talking like Monopoly and Chutes and Ladders and Chinese checkers and that kind of board game, or am I off in La La Land and I'm not in touch with anything?
No, we definitely, I mean, we have all of those that you just mentioned. We've got a really broad selection, and we use a lot of like our local, we have like a game cafe in the town next to ours. I used to do some work writing for a couple of board game companies that used to design their own games. So every couple of months I get sent this amazing big box of games to trial for them, so I could write about them and do product reviews and things. And it was great because I just had so many games to try every month. I think I ended up giving quite a few of them, like donating them once I tried them, just to like the games cafes, because a lot of them are they're independent and they're obviously putting out a lot of stuff at great expense. Board games, as we all know, do not come cheap. So it was nice to support them in that way. But yeah, I mean, we do strategy games, war games, we do role-playing and storytelling games. I'm currently attempting to get my nieces, who are 8 and 10, into storytelling games. They're not as enthusiastic as I would like, but I'm wearing them down.
During a thrift store visit, what would be the ultimate find for you that you'd be like, wow, I hit the jackpot with this find? What would be the game that would be like your...
I mean, anything that's in the kind of RPG vein, so like your Arkham horrors, your Eldritch horrors, your Call of Cthulhu, just purely because those games are so cost heavy. And especially now, people don't have money to throw around, and that's why I think getting people into the online versions of these games is a really good thing. For some people, to play one game can be several $100s, just to get those figurines and the cards and all the accoutrements that you need. And it's a way of making it a little bit inaccessible. So yeah, I mean, if I found one of those, that would be striking total gold.
I have a couple on the shelf here that I really should pass on to people, because I bought them hoping to get my kids interested in. They really haven't. There are some games that they have lots of interest in, but the likes of those kind of emergent kind of storytelling ones. I'm looking up here. I have 12 Realms. I have Last Night in Earth. I also have Arkham Horror, the card game up there as well. But like 12 Realms was a Kickstarter that's worth a lot of money, and it's just literally sitting on my shelf up here. It has that and the expansion pack inside it. And I really should donate it to somebody that's going to make very good use of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got like local board game cafes, the more you can support them, I mean, we sadly lost one of ours recently. They had to close because they were affected by the pandemic. And when they announced on Facebook that they were going to close and they were going to have like a goodbye party for their regulars. And literally everyone jumped on that was a part of that community and said, what do we need to keep this open? Putting their hands in their pockets going, we will do what we need to do, because these places become so important to the community.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that not everybody will use all the time, but they want to know that it's there.
Yeah.
It's the same, I would say, with like local bookstores, independent bookstores, same local independent cinema, all of those things that people were like, if those things went away, even though they may only use them once a year, people would be horrified at them. As you say, would be like, right, we need to support this on a one-off or something to keep it going, keep them sustainable, because as a business, they need regular custom and they're not getting it, but they're still an important resource.
Yeah, absolutely.
The comfort of having them around, even if you don't visit, it's still nice knowing, like you said, nice knowing they're there. But before we go, Varsha, I was hoping you could tell us about your new series that you're starting on your channel.
Oh, I started a new series called Bright Threads in the Tapestry because I was reading the Fiona War Tapestry, and there was one scene that made me stop, and I was like, who do I tell this to? Who do I talk about this with? And I think around the same time, I also started reading The Wars of Light and Shadow, and they were like, I was highlighting huge sections of those books, and I've been reading Malazan for 3-ish years now, and I've got giant highlights that I want to go back to and talk to people about. So I figured I will start a series where I read sections of those books and then talk about what I enjoyed and appreciated in that. I have no academic background in literature, so it's just me talking about how I feel about that, like what about those sections spoke to me, and putting some things together, like there's a subplot or sub-theme or something that I like that isn't always part of the bigger story, but you can sort of put the pieces together to form an opinion about something that happened. So that's kind of what I'm aiming to do with that series. The first 2 episodes are out. The first one was from the Fiona Tapestry, in which I went through one passage about a tribe chieftain musing about his children and his tribe. And then the second one that went live today was some sections from The Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wurts.
Heard of that?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah.
No, she did an absolutely lovely job.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good job.
Oh yeah, and I plan to put out episodes every week. I'll alternate Fiona Tapestry, Wars of Light and Shadow, and Malazan, and I'll throw in some other books as I read them. For now, what I plan to interlude with is Terry Pratchett and Lavi Tidar. I'll probably add more authors as I find more books that I have highlights from.
Yeah, it's
really-
not.
Oh, it's okay.
I was going to say it's not like Varsha's doing that many read-alongs or series at the moment. They kind of pulled from, so it's
Yeah, it's a difficult job.
Yeah.
Well, what I really appreciated about your throwing the spotlight on Fiona Tapestry is you see so many people say that that's not an important work or that's not Guy Kay's best, and they pan it in their reviews saying it's derivative, and what they don't understand at all, and I did because of my reading background coming into it, was he took all the antecedent material before that Tolkien and all those original writers drew from. He took the original myths and rewove them into one story. So he wasn't deriving from them. He was taking from their derivatives. And what I liked the best about it is what he did with the Arthurian myth, because he took the love triangle in that always infuriated me. The madnessing thing about the Arthurian legend is that love triangle. And he made something different out of it. And it was so beautiful where he took that. It sort of put to rest all of my anger for all those years for what happened in the original telling of those legends. So I really, really admired that you took on that project of talking about that book, because it's one of those books that I feel is unjustly maligned and misunderstood through ignorance, because people don't realize how old some of the myths are that he was taking from the writing and how many of them he worked into that story. I wonder if people really understand the full scope of his background and what he created there. Very few readers today probably do.
Yeah, I think I've only read 2 out of the 3 books, and I haven't got into the main portions of Arthur legend yet, but what is there already is just so beautiful.
It's coming, and it's beautiful. And not only that, he took myth from some of the matrilineal cultures that those antecedents did not bother with, you know, that the Tolkien and that completely discounted, and he added those back in. So I think it's a phenomenal work. And it's never received its just appreciation, because people knee-jerk look at it and say, oh, this is just another one of those. And it's ignorance. And I try to forgive that. But I think that's a monumental work for other reasons than most people bother to point out.
Yeah. And it's easy to look at a story and the high-level elements and say, oh, it's derivative, and dismiss it. But if you really look at the writing, I loved how beautifully it is written. Like, there were sections of it that just made me want to cry from how beautifully it was written. And it wasn't even a sad thing that was happening. It was just something that was written so beautifully, it brought tears to my eyes. And sure, you're telling the same story, but how are you telling it? That also matters quite a lot. The words on the page matter. It might be the same story at a top level, maybe, if you want to think about it that way. But I think the words really have power to evoke different emotions if you want to invest in that. So yeah, I really love the words on the page with that one. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. That was something I talked about, I read Beloved by Toni Morrison, who also writes beautifully. But a really challenging, sad, thematic book. but writes in such beauty that it sort of transforms the struggle and the pain and all those kind of things that go with it. And that's one of the things literature can do.
Mm. Yeah.
Cool. I've only read Tagana by Guy Gavriel Kay, but there's no doubt that man can write. Oh my God, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and these are his first books. I cannot wait to see what he's done later on. It's absolutely brilliant. I loved his writing. But I'm also excited about the other series that I'm talking about. Those are also books I love quite a bit.
Some people might hate me for saying that, but I've felt for years, and I've followed Guy Kay's career since his first book out. Literally, since his first book, I've gotten everything. He is one of the few male authors who is unafraid to write sentiment, unafraid to write emotion, unafraid to get neck deep in nostalgia. A lot of the later works that he's done were the nostalgia for what it was like to age and what it was like to be young and to grow older. I've often said he should have been a female writer. Women do those things extremely well, and they get discounted for it. Kay has gotten accolades for it, but he is unafraid to delve into those areas that many men are afraid to express themselves and to that depth. So I admire him for that. Always have.
Probably worth the saving for future conversation. But as a male who reads, I don't need to read lots of other male perspectives. Like, I'm fascinated by the female voice as being an alternative view in the world. And I don't understand why more males aren't in that headspace. You know, that kind of blows my mind a little bit. That you wouldn't.
I think they're taught very young that it's not appropriate. I think it's cultural teaching that emotion is not to be. The only time my father ever hung up on me was because I had an emotional argument, and then he said, "Emotion doesn't belong in the boardroom." Bam, they just can't handle it, or something.
But like I've just read one of your chapters, Janny, where you're talking about the female gaze in some ways, as how Talith was looking at Arathon, etc. You know, and how that perspective from a female point of view compares to a male's perspective of looking at a woman with fresh eyes and stuff. And I think all of that stuff is endlessly fascinating, because that's the perspective that I will never have. And like ever, regardless of how much I read or experience, or that's something that I need to experience through somebody else's eyes. And you know, I don't know. Definitely worth exploring.
I spent a lot of time where I was the only woman in the room or in the community doing an activity that was all men. I was the first woman in 3 different pipe bands. Now women are in pipe bands all over the place. It's perfectly acceptable. But back when I started, it was not accepted. It was not. The only way you got in was if you could outplay them. I did a lot of offshore sailing where I was the only female crew. And it was like I was not the cook. I was the crew, or I was running the radios, or I was. So I spent a lot of time in all male situations where once it was recognized that I was competent to do my job, they forgot I was there. So I spent a lot of time listening to what was going on and how they talked to each other and how they teased each other and the way they reacted to each other, the way they expressed their relationships, very different than how women do. So a lot of that probably backflashed into my writing, because honestly, I never made any claim I was anything other than a woman. But once you established your competence, they forgot. And they would say things in front of you that they would never say. One of them said, "I would never take my sister into this bar." It was a pipe band going in, and I'm sitting here thinking, wow, your poor sister, you know, but you don't think anything of me walking in there with you guys. You know, it was just interesting to see how the perspective shifted. So that's just something to think about. And I appreciate the fact, Chris, that you're willing to expand your viewpoint and be fascinated by that, because so many were taught not to. They were taught it was a waste of time, and they just slam the door, and you can't even speak to them. You can't communicate across that cultural barrier because they were taught so very young that those things were not acceptable.
So strange. So strange. I'll never understand it. Like female songwriters as well. Nearly all my favorite artists are all female songwriters, whether it's from the old, like Joni Mitchell, etc. Like, well, although I would say that's how I was brought up. Like Joni Mitchell had a deeper understanding of the world than most of her contemporaries, etc. And when you listen to her music, etc., you can definitely feel and hear that. Like there definitely was, you know. Anyway, for another Friday conversation, probably, Steve. Sorry.
That's a great topic.
Well, you come from a culture that has a lot of female artists.
That's true. That is true.
I mean, the Celtic tradition, where those people were living in those tiny little houses and there was absolutely nothing to do, and it gets dark at what, 3 p.m. in the winter?
Yeah.
Long nights. And how did they entertain themselves? Storytelling, song. Your traditional myths have a lot more women in them.
That's very true.
Than many do. So it could be cultural, Chris. I don't know.
I think you're probably right. I think I talked about that a little bit in terms of how you deal with conflict, etc. That the arts are phenomenally important in our culture, like as an ongoing concern.
I just wanted to ask Holly, because Holly, you go by HL Tinsley. Was that a deliberate choice to use HL instead of your name?
I mean, first of all, I'd just like to say that I am way too sleep deprived for this deep of a conversation. So, it wasn't. I mean, I definitely did have apprehensions about using my full name on the cover of a debut novel. I didn't know how many people would discount me being a female writer, and I'm sure that there are people who have, and that's, you know, fine. You know, they can read what they want to read. So I did initially, maybe not entirely to I can't, sorry, sleep deprivation is just getting to me now. Basically I did that, but then I immediately went on social media and was very apparently who I am, you know, and I went on podcasts and, you know, did blogs and things. So I don't think I particularly hid, you know, my secret identity very well. But, you know, I've never known anything but positivity to my face, you know, and as what people say behind my back is not my business. And I'm not interested to hear that. I've always had, you know, a welcome from the community, support from the community, and, you know, the people who wouldn't want to get to know me or engage with me because of my gender or the way I look. That's just people that I wouldn't want to have that engagement with anyway. Yeah, that's all the answer I can give. Sorry, I'm sleepy.
Okay. No, it's the time flies, but to be continued. We'll catch another time. And,
yeah, it's a great subject. I just don't have the brain power.
I don't think it affects so much about what they would say to your face or not. It definitely affects who will pick up your book.
Yeah.
And there are certain kinds of writing where women are not discriminated against, and in fact, it might even be an advantage. But there are certain other branches of fantasy where it's a total disadvantage because there's a whole sector of people who won't read your book. They won't pick it up, or if they do, they're not prepared for a depth of examination or a depth of intelligence, or I don't want to use that word because it's too loaded. A depth of philosophy or a depth of thought. They don't regard women as having that. And so they're either very hard on it or very dismissive of it, or even the women are apt to judge to a harder standard. It's almost like, how dare you step into that? So in certain cases, a gender neutral pseudonym is a huge advantage simply because there's a whole sector of people who are too fragile to take the chance, or you just handed them something that was much chewier than they were prepared to swallow. And they're going to come back at you for it. So if I had it to do over, the misogyny has changed and gotten worse to the point where, hands down, I would have chose a male pseudonym, not even a gender neutral. I would have written under a male name for what I'm trying to do with my work. Hands down, I would have done that. But you can't change horses in midstream with a massive series. I'm going to have to hoe the row I've got and hopefully can overcome it. Yeah. But I know there's a massive number of people that won't pick up a book because, or you go and you look at Who's your favorite characters? How many of them are all male? Or what's your most favorite quote? Even though women have wrote incredibly philosophical books, you don't see McKillop, you don't see some of the women, Cherry, who writes some amazingly deep stuff. You see a list of male names as if male writers are that's all who's doing that kind of thing. So it's a case of breaking the expectations. You're working constantly against the friction of that expectation. And I could wish that wasn't so. So I don't think a new writer starting out is making a mistake by writing under a female name. And in some branches, it's an advantage. But think carefully, because once you're started, it's very hard to change back. The atmosphere when I began was not the atmosphere there is today. Totally different. Chris?
I have to admit, it wasn't until you'd pointed out when we were talking about it in Curse and the Mystery that I walked to the bookstore kind of the next week and then looked at all the shelves of science fiction and fantasy and seen how many openly female authors we had actually on the 4 rows of science fiction and fantasy, and it was quite stark. Especially for authors that weren't openly like writing for YA audience, which seems to be what an awful lot of people are pigeonholed into. If you exclude a couple of those names, there's almost none.
Yeah. If you're not writing YA or you're not writing a certain type of fiction that is more or less geared, or men think it's geared for women. It isn't. It's geared for everyone, but it's considered a woman's book.
Yeah.
So certain of the ones where it's heavily weighted towards romance, which is a shame because some of those powerful books are literally romances. I mean, I had an experience where I handed a book to my dad and said, read this. It was an Elizabeth Lowell book called Tell Me No Lies. And he read it and it blew his mind. He loved it. He walked into the bookstore and he said, give me another book by Elizabeth Lowell. And the cashier behind the desk about fell over. He said, what are you doing? 50-year-old man reading? He didn't realize he was a romance writer, okay? Yeah. He didn't realize it, but the book was written that well. So I hate these lines being drawn. I really, really do. But yeah, so there's certain areas where if you are not writing in that expectation, it just makes it harder. And we have enough noise and signal to noise problem going on with everything that's hitting people in life right now, between the politics, the internet, the social media, the constant bombardment of how many titles even come out in a day. You don't need one bit of extra friction. It's like trying to do a masterpiece with a cheap paintbrush. Buy the best brush you possibly can because you may not be wasting your time fighting the equipment. So I feel that way about bylines. Get your work out there and worry about who you are. Secondary to that, the important thing is get it seen and don't work against the grain. Because you will do more as a female author successful under a neutral byline, bringing it home to people what women can do than you will by putting yourself in a box where prejudice has the least chance of stopping you. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Holly, I know it's getting late for you, and it's we appreciate you staying up late with us.
Yeah, sorry, it's been like 2 days for me where I've had like very little sleep. So I knew coming into this that I was going to struggle at this point. So I've been trying to drink as much caffeine throughout this as I can just to keep going.
No, I appreciate it. But before we go, can you tell us where people can find you and your work?
To be honest, I'd say Twitter, but I haven't been spending that much time on there recently.
X.
Superface, whatever it's called these days. I am on there occasionally, periodically updating. I do have a website, which is Holly Tinsley Writes, and I am on Amazon and Goodreads as well, so people can find me in all those places.
Nice. And Chris?
You can find me on my YouTube channel. I'll start with that this time. Just at my name, Chris Mohan, or you can find me on Page Tune Forums, where we have got lots and lots of things going on, all organized by Varsha, as it turns out.
Yeah. She's taking over as a bad influence.
Yeah. and I thank her for that.
Janny, where can people find you?
If you spell my name correctly, I'm the only Janny Wurts in the world. So I'm not hard to find. I've got some 20 novels out there, 36 short stories. I hang out on Twitter, as it used to be called, and I hang out on Page Chewing, and I pop through Our Fantasy now and again, and I got a Goodreads account. I'm definitely approachable. So I appreciate Steve making the space for this, and definitely check out Chris's channel and Varsha's, because they're putting out incredible material and well worth your time to listen. And Holly, I'll have to look up your books. But it's been a pleasure to meet you today.
Yeah, so it's been a pleasure. Everyone apart from Steve is new to me today, so it's been really nice to talk to you and kind of put faces to names and having seen you on the forums.
And Janny, I'll actually send Holly's book to your way, because I have to send some books your way anyway. So
oh wow!
I'll send it over to you.
Oh, book mail!
And,
if I die tomorrow, it was because my TBR pile fell over and hit me in the head. And what a way to go! What a way to go!
We're almost friends.
Steve, or Dave Hartwell got hurt actually carrying cartons of books down the stairs when he was moving. To me, that's a good way to go out.
I just want to say I take no responsibility if Janny gets hurt because Steve sent her my book.
How big is your book, Holly?
I wouldn't be blaming you.
Just Steve.
And you're safe. I don't have the squirrel anymore.
It's not deadly. No.
No, I look forward to it. I look forward to it tremendously. That'll be a blast.
And Varsha?
My YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and I hang out a lot on the Page Chewing forum, organizing read-alongs that tumble other people's TBRs.
Can confirm. Lots of stuff coming up. So excited.
Yes.
Exciting stuff. But thanks everyone for coming by, and hope everyone has a great week. And thanks for listening. You can find me on pagechewing.com. That's where I am more often than not. So we'll talk to everyone very soon.